So I didn't start recording until after I introduced my guests. I'll do the introduction here. This episode is with Jacklyn of the Black and Yellow podcast. I hope you enjoy.
Granddad never mentioned that there were men as dark as this. Wow, look at that nose. He's just like a pig. He's a monster! Hi.
Thank you for reaching out and having me on your show. So Alana and I co-host the Black and Yellow podcast, and this birthed from a place where we were both having conversations that we had actually never heard other people have, as transparent, as honest, as vulnerable as we were having with each other. So we created the Black and Yellow podcast, and our hope is to provide conversations that speak some truth to you, that challenge you, that inspire you, and that, you know, keeps us unified and together throughout everything that's happening in today's world. So, yeah, that's pretty much it.
From a Black and Asian perspective.
Yeah, specifically Black and Asian, more feminist driven for sure, from, you know, our walks of life. And most of our conversations on our episodes are about Asian female and Black female oriented.
Okay. So I wanted to ask about yellow fever. What is that? What is yellow fever? Is it problematic? And if so, how is it problematic?
So yellow fever, also known as, I think in a more broad term, is an Asian fetish. So it's an Asian fetish, you know, an obsession or an objectification to Asian people. It could be their culture, it could be anything, you know, Asian origin, and it pretty much has to do with only to do with the race. So in the sense that someone might have an Asian fetish and they might not even think about their human qualities, but only because they're Asian, they decide to date them. And that is yellow fever. And if you look at some people who have yellow fever, they will only date Asian women. And so it does become problematic because it ends up being about the human quality, I believe. It becomes mostly about just their look and their culture. And so I think if they don't recognize that they have an Asian fetish, that that's just not kind.
Okay.
In my opinion.
It got a little bit choppy at a certain point. I wanted to reinforce this. You said like yellow fever makes the Asian woman look like less of a human and more of an object. Okay. Okay. So have you dealt with or heard of stories from Asian women about guys hitting on them because they're Asian? How are you or those women dealt with that?
Absolutely. I have read so many articles. I've heard so many stories from other women who were hit on just because they were Asians. You know, they've heard all kinds of inhumane and grotesque things, you know, things that I'm not going to say on the air right now, but obviously, you know, the classic, oh, you're so exotic, where are you from, do you even speak English, when did you learn English, are you from China, and it's tough because I think many Asian women have gotten to a point where they became accustomed to it, so it wouldn't even shock them by this point. Or they became used to just kind of shrugging it off, like not putting up a fight, not educating the man or whoever it was that was saying these, you know, these extremely racist things to them. And so I think as of late, it's gotten much better. I think Asian women are standing up for themselves. I think Asian visibility has been skyrocketing for the past couple years. But I think it's a tough situation because there's so many things that you have to take account into that moment. You have to see where you're at. Is the location, is the environment I'm at going to be conducive to what I'm about to say? Am I safe if I decide to say something that might get this person angry? And so it's a very, very tricky situation. And I think the best way to do it is to just analyze where you are and who you're talking to. If this person is a stranger, did they just walk up to you? Are they drunk? All these things that come into part that people don't really think twice about, that we've all dealt with. And so I think it's time to now start to stand up for ourselves and speak our mind, but obviously be safe and appropriate in the area that you're at. So. Okay.
I wanted to quote one of your podcasts to bring some further context, I guess, into, I'm assuming, how you feel about this particular situation. In an episode of your podcast titled Most Dateable, your co-host Alana mentions that 64% of Asian women said that when they've received direct messages from suitors online, those suitors led with something that could be described as a fetish, such as, "Hey, I like Asian girls, we should go out." And Alana asked how that made you feel, and you said the following. I'm trying to quote it verbatim. "It's pretty disgusting, and I feel I feel bad for them, because they'll probably won't get many girls if you lead like that all the time. You know, not if you want like a serious relationship. You might, I don't know, you might get a hookup here and there, who knows. If you're not constantly leading with that, it saddens me. And then, you know, to think how they grew up, who their mothers are, I instantly go to like what kind of education they had, where they grew up, and the fact that they're there. And there's been a lot of times where I've also said, like, you know, that may not be the first thing that you should say to a woman." So that was choppy, but I tried to quote it verbatim. Again, just to reinforce that that's what it pretty much feels like from your position.
Yeah, and I think many other women feel the same way. I mean, there was this really wonderful article on Huffington Post. It was written by, let me see here, Brittany Wong, and the title of the article is "Dear White Guys, Your Asian Fetish is Showing." And it pretty much chronicles Lillian. She's about 20 years old. She lives in New York and Boston, and she talks about what it's like to be on these dating apps. And besides it, obviously now being on the phone, and, you know, you don't see the person up front, but I've had, you know, men straight up just say, "Oh, I really like Asian women." And like I said on the podcast, you have to be a lot more educated nowadays to think that an Asian woman is going to be interested in you just because you say that you like Asian women. Or in the Huffington Post article, you know, all these men say all kinds of things like, "I've never been with an Asian girl before, so banging you would be a dream come true. I need my yellow fever cured." You know, like, I don't... It saddens me in the fact of, on a humanity standpoint, that obviously these dating apps are not so much for, and maybe some, and I'm sure many people have met and have married and have been very successful in their relationships. However, most of them are also known for, you know, hookups, or not really there for looking for a true connection, because I do think that if you are looking for a true connection, you obviously wouldn't be leading with that. So yeah, I stand in what I said, that, you know, I think there needs to be a lot more education in how you're going to approach any kind of woman, first of all, but especially if she's a woman of color.
Okay. Last question on this subject. You talked about Brittany Wong's article. Do you think that that might be the best way for yellow fever to be discussed as an Asian woman, writing articles about it, make people aware about the issues that Asian women face in the dating world?
Yeah, I definitely think about it, because it's happening now. You know, people are speaking about it, people are writing about it, people are social media has done huge favors on our end about this. You know, being very transparent and making sure we start to kind of deconstruct it, in the sense that it has existed for, you know, decades on end now, and through Hollywood and media and movies and all the stuff. And I mean, I think a lot of Asian celebrities are being really advocate, like they're being, you know, very talking about it a lot. Ali Wong has a whole bit in her comedy special. Constance Wu has been very vocal about the role of white men in movies. So I think just kind of being really real and honest and just, you know, shedding some light on something that needs to kind of slowly, I think, diminish as time goes on. But who am I to say? I'm an Asian woman. I'm not a white man. So hopefully I would like it. I would like to see it be diminished.
Okay. Moving on to the media, how has the media played into the objectification of Asian women?
Oh, there's a lot here. When I talk about media in this sense, the media that I'm going to talk about is obviously Hollywood. And the type of Hollywood that I would say is white Hollywood, because you have white people writing white stories for white people. However, when they start to try to incorporate ethnic roles, add more diversity into it, I mean, there's so many that I can't even count on my fingers, you know. I mean, the biggest one is in Breakfast at Tiffany's, you know, which was extremely controversial. But I don't think the media has helped. I don't think Hollywood, in the sense of the movies that they've been making and have helped this direction in any shape or form. I mean, women have been objectified and have been a symbol of sexuality and eroticism for so long. And that's not all. There's not only that one kind of Asian woman, you know. Like it's pretty sad.
Okay, I didn't realize that there was See, that might be my not knowing, but like I didn't know that there was an Asian woman in the what was it called? The movie that you said, I can't say the name.
Oh no, I was talking about Breakfast at Tiffany's with Mickey Rooney playing the upstairs neighbor, and he's supposed to be Chinese. Oh. But he's portrayed as he's white, and he's playing Chinese, and the portrayal of it was just extremely crude and rude. In the sense that how it originated, you know, like you have these white people with these telling white stories, and they tried to somehow diversify it, but not tastefully, and actually extremely racist. So I'm saying in the sense of like the roots, you know, like even when it originally started, it was never even very I guess you could say, what's the best word for this? Just they didn't put any other thought into it, you know. They thought, oh yeah, let's just cast this person who's not even Asian to play Asian.
Yeah, do that all the time in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Do you think that the media reinforces the popularity of white male, Asian female couples?
I definitely think there are more white male and Asian female couples. And when you say media, do you have a specific type of media that you're talking about?
So I mentioned this in the email that I was going to mention Full Metal Jacket. There's a scene in that particular film where I guess you would call this a problematic white male Asian female relationship. The prostitute is trying to solicit herself to, or like get white men to pay for her services. And there's this dynamic of like the white guy seeing the Asian woman as like, you know, easy or to please a white man. And then the Asian woman sees the white man as like an opportunity for money. And that like negative stereotype is reinforced in that particular scene. I don't know if you saw that one, but that's what I was referencing. That's what I was thinking of, stuff like that.
I see. Yes, I definitely think that, especially in the wartime era, you know, with Vietnam and Japan and China, that was heavily enforced. It's tough because a lot of it was based on actual events that did happen. You know, a lot of women had to become prostitutes to get by, and then sort of got stuck in there, and then you know, a lot of women found escapism in marrying a white guy and having kids that could have a better future than her. Madame Butterfly, you know, that was written by, believe that was written by David Henry Hwang, who's Asian. Let me just make sure I'm correct here. So it's tough because there's been so much of this for so long. So I think the media definitely hasn't helped, especially when they also have portrayed the Asian man as less masculine. Oh no, Madame Butterfly was written by the composer Puccini. Anyways, I just wanted to make sure I was correct on this. And so yeah, the media has definitely reinforced white male and Asian female couples for a long time, and it hasn't helped.
Okay. Speaking of the media, like, emasculating Asian men, in that same scene that I mentioned in Full Metal Jacket, an Asian guy steals a camera that's being used when the prostitute wants to take a photo of one of the white guys she's trying to have sex with. And in another scene, the prostitute hesitates to have sex with a black guy, and it kind of comes off as racist. But there's a stereotype of black men having a big penis, and she's afraid of that, which is kind of like, I guess, a joke, but it just seems to be a little bit weird. And then she's about to go off with him, but then the white guy steals her at the last second, which leads me to my question that I gave you before. If we're talking about white male, Asian female, and the media pushing that narrative, is there also something to be said about the media degrading non-white men, including Asian men, in the eyes of Asian women?
I'm not so sure in the eyes of Asian women because, you know, for a long time, I think as a byproduct of seeing a lot of Asian women with white men, there has somehow been the assumption that Asian women don't like Asian men, or Asian women find Asian men less attractive. And I don't necessarily think that that is the case here, but I have seen in the past how movies and media have portrayed Asian men as weaker or less masculine, or only that one type, which is the kung fu type. You know, and I do understand that maybe Asian men, the built of Asian men, they're, you know, a little smaller in frame. Maybe they don't have as much facial hair or any kind of body hair, which in turn, based on societal norms and beauty norms, that's not masculine. But they definitely haven't helped in aiding Asian men in showing that they're more masculine. I wouldn't say necessarily through the eyes of a female. And that's obviously Stanley Kubrick, you know, being very opinionated about what he wanted to show in that moment. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's definitely through the eyes of an Asian woman, but definitely through stories in general written by and shown by and directed by whoever it was at that time.
Okay. Moving on from the media to real life, how popular is the pairing of white male, Asian female from what you see?
Pretty popular, I'd say. I would say white male and Asian female are more popular than Asian male with a white female, as well as Asian female with a black male. So I feel like it's getting better. I feel like I've been seeing more and more interracial couples in the sense that, you know, it's a Latino guy with an Asian female, or you know, an Asian man with a Latina woman. But definitely the white male and Asian female stereotype is, I believe, well and alive.
Okay. So for your perspective, it's not so much Asian women gravitating to white men over Asian men, it's Asian women out marrying overall?
I think so, yeah. I think I think also too, as we become more modern in the sense of, you know, the possibilities of leaving one's country, and I think people traveling more and more. You know, I've heard a lot of stories, and I've met a lot of people where, you know, a big group of Americans traveled to some other country, Southeast Asia, so and so, and they met their wives there. You know, and it wasn't because of war or anything that was became a necessity or out of some sort of fetish, or maybe obviously some curiosity in traveling and seeing other countries. But I don't necessarily think it, you know, I think times are changing. And I do think that Asian females, based on what I've seen, and I live in Los Angeles, California, so it's very diverse here. A lot of Asians here. I also grew up in a predominantly Asian neighborhood, and I do feel like I see more Asian female with white males as a result of that.
Okay. Have you or anyone you known dealt with harassment for dating white guys?
As far as being an Asian woman,
Yes.
dealing with harassment from white guys?
No. For dating white guys. From other people.
I see. I haven't necessarily, thank goodness, dealt with, because I know a lot of Asian women have gotten a lot of, can I curse on here?
Yeah.
Okay. I know a lot of Asian women that have gotten a lot of shit for dating white men, and maybe only dating white men. I've heard my brother say some things. I've heard some of my Asian guy friends say some things. And you know, I hear it and I'm like, okay, how much of that is true? How much is their own public opinion? How much is their own perspective? What have they gone through? So I'm grateful that I haven't gotten much harassment or any harassment for dating white guys, but I know some women who have, and I've heard some Asian girls straight up say that they don't like Asian guys because of, you know, X, Y, and Z. I've also heard Asian women that have dated all kinds of guys and haven't really gotten much harassment, but that whole, don't get me wrong, as an Asian woman who has dated white guys, that's always in our minds. Like, someone's gonna maybe see us or see me and they're gonna think that, you know, and it's unfortunate that is now a thing that crosses our minds, because I think we should have the liberty and the freedom to love and date and like whoever we want in that sense. And I've read a bunch of articles, you know, about how they've even gotten, the hardest thing is that a lot of Asian women have gotten this backlash on dating white guys from Asian men and other Asian women. And so it's tough when even your own community is treating you a certain way, for you know, they thinking that you're betraying your kind, which is really tough to deal with.
That actually leads into my next question. Can an Asian woman be attracted to white men and still fight for Asian causes, in your opinion?
I absolutely believe so. I think just because whoever you're with doesn't mean that you can't, you know, become cultured. You can't advocate for Asian visibility. You can't want to write and talk about and say and you know, speak about Asian stories and supporting Asian politicians or Asian-owned businesses. Like, I think it's the same way how I feel like men can be feminists, you know, men can fight for women causes even though they're a man. And I think it's the same way. I don't think that a woman who's attracted to all white men cannot fight for Asian causes at all.
Okay. This brings in another quote, this time from your podcast episode, Stop Harassing Asian Women. You and Alana are talking about dating a white guy in Asia. It's about 30 minutes in. It's a long quote, but given what I just asked, I think it's important. You say, I would take it, I'd go. If I could leave my country where there's a bunch of dead people and all of my family is dead, and I fall in love with this man, why not? why, like you said, you would benefit so much. Alana says, yeah, and I mean, it's also a very one-sided argument because it sounds like these men are calling out Asian women for essentially being with men who have treated them as fetishized objects to be won for so long. But excuse me, any Asian men attacking Asian women online, if you have the audacity to attack these women for marrying out, but sir, you yourself lay up under a white woman when you get home at night, you're a hypocrite. You mean you lay up under a white woman, the demographic of women who don't give a fuck about you and pay attention to you, that emasculate you until you're somebody, until you're famous, until you're successful, and then they want to be up all under your dick? Like, stop. Really? Stop, gentlemen. Like, no, this is bullshit. And in times like this, you should be coming together. You say, if anything in times like this, and if anything, okay, so what? What if she likes to be fetishized? What if that's her thing? Alana, that's the other thing. What if that turns her on? You say, yeah, let her be sexualized, let her be fetishized by the man that she loves. If anyone could do that, it's her man. Alana says, how dare she make that choice to be objectified and enjoy it? That when I heard that, it seemed to contradict the idea of fetishization being problematic. And when an Asian woman is with a white guy, there may be this idea that like it's now not a big deal anymore, like there might be a switch of opinion. And I heard that. I wanted to bring that quote in to get an idea of what you thought, now that I said that.
So, you know, we talk about this sort of white worshipping, this idea of marrying outside of your culture, this idea of marrying white men. And, you know, I think there are very specific moments, and I think a lot of this came out of a level of necessity. So as an Asian woman, if and that's what you quoted on the podcast, but if I were to put my shoes in that era, and the only hope I have to get out of this country to survive is to marry a white man, I would have done it because I have to survive. And I think that's not a race thing. I don't think that's a fetish thing. I don't think that is any kind of, I think that is a basic humanistic survival need, you know, to want to survive and thrive. And out of that, there was I feel like a lot of stories that came out of that people either wrote about or told about, or, you know, a lot of soldiers who had American wives and fell in love with Asian women. So it's tough because it's kind of a catch-22, right? You don't want to perpetuate this sort of white male, Asian female, in the sense that if it is just through a fetish, it is just sort of this idea that you love Asian women and their culture, but you kind of forget that they are, you know, even a human. And so it's in that sense where it was like, if these women have made her choice to marry a white man and be secure in that, and if he loves her for who she is and enjoys her culture, then I think if those things are, and they're aware of that, I think if it's coming from a place of honesty and realism, and they love each other as two partners, then I wouldn't object to that. Does that make sense? Even if
there may be a toxic like element in that particular relationship, if she made the choice, then it's okay. Yeah,
right. If she's deciding to make the choice, then who am I to say, you know, don't do it because you're perpetuating this stereotype? Because I'm not her. I don't know where she comes from. I don't know what her past. What if she was, the only way she was able to survive and leave her country was through this, and therefore it has become part of her identity, and you know, it's so much more complex than a more broader term of just this Asian fetish type of existence.
It's more complex. Yeah.
What were you gonna say?
It's more complex.
Yeah, I think it's way more complex because you'd have to dive into, you know, her backstory and how they met and all the stuff that falls into it as well. And I think that's where Alana and I were like connecting on, was that if that's the case, then she should be perfectly fine with owning and loving who she is with her man, and no one should say no, you're this and you're that. You know, I think when we're talking about an Asian fetish, and the toxic element of these people who aren't educated and don't know where it's coming from and are doing it because so and so did it, you know, or they're doing it because they saw a movie, or they're doing it because, you know, they have friends who have Asian girlfriends. It's different when you're talking about, you know, that type of example. I believe so.
Okay. So given that there's been a lot of controversy in terms of people trying to bring out the issues surrounding white male, Asian female from the other side, what do you think is the best way to discuss white worship and controversial white male, Asian female couples? If the current discussion surrounding these couples is problematic, why is that so, in your opinion?
So dealing with you know, race, religion, everything that's going on right now, it's always going to be extremely sensitive, intense, and I think people have to listen before they speak and think very hard and understand where they're coming from and what they're saying. And in order to have a discussion, I think we all have to be willing to kind of let the ego kind of step aside. And I think as long as the ego is there and you are so committed to being right about what you want to say, there's no way to have a proper discussion. You know, it's going to end up in some sort of argument, some sort of, you know, trolling, some sort of really mean and harsh comment, which we see all the time, which isn't conducive to growth at all. And I think that's why Alana and I have these conversations, because we challenge each other in seeing each other's perspectives or bringing a different perspective to light. But I think the best way is to just be as open as possible to first listening to whatever the other person is going to say, whether you agree with them or not, whether you understand them or not at all. And then just don't let that, whatever it is you're saying, really get to you, because I think that, again, closes any possibility off of further discussion, further growth, further enlightenment, all of that, and above. And the current discussion right now for me has, you know, really been through, it's been sort of dark in the sense that I think a lot of Asian women have gotten a lot of backlash and a lot of shit for dating white men. And then through this sort of darkness and pain and feeling betrayal and hurt and depression, they then kind of emerge into the world and stand their ground and write an article, or, you know, like the Fleshlight Chronicles on Instagram by Lillian, who's just only 20 years old. That blows my mind. Can't imagine being 20 and dealing with all that stuff. And so I think through this sort of pain and suffering and feeling, you know, hurt, births this sort of, I'm going to stand my ground and talk about it and write about it and speak about it, and I don't care what anyone else thinks. So I wouldn't say it's extremely problematic. I would definitely say there could be healthier ways around it, but I wouldn't know until, you know, something were to personally happen to me. And I think I'm definitely, you know, coming into my 30s and feeling a lot more confident in who I am. And so, yeah, I think it'll evolve as it does. But the fact that it's being brought to light, I think, is really important.
Okay. But it's not like there's a double standard in terms of, like, white male, Asian female can't be discussed, but yellow fever can. It's a matter of, I guess, how the discussion is presented.
Yeah, I don't think there's a double standard at all. I think it just depends on, like you said, how it's presented, but also just, are these people willing to share their stories? I mean, I read a bunch of blogs on mothers who have interracial daughters, and I've talked about what it's like to raise an interracial daughter, and to see something so vulnerable and raw, kind of just out there, it really touches my heart, and it takes a lot of courage to speak about these areas in which many people might not want to hear it. Many people might judge and criticize you like crazy. But if you have to tell your story and you want to tell your story, I think every person should be able to and have every right to.
Okay. I wanted to bring in one last quote from your podcast, again, from Stop Harassing Asian Women. This is toward the end, about 54 minutes in, you're referencing two articles, Celeste Ng's When Asian Women Are Harassed for Marrying Non-Asian Men, and the Huffington Post article, I Didn't Surrender My Asian American Identity When I Married a White Man. It's not as long as the last quote, but I'll just start. You say, I think that what these articles are saying is like, just don't let this stuff get in the way of raising the child that you want to raise, of loving the person that you want to love. And for those Asian men or any other man or any other woman that's giving you shit for loving and being who you are, great. Like, put it out in the open. Write an article about it. Tell your friends, tell your family, talk to your husband, talk to your child about it. Like, just talking about it, getting it out there is a way to start educating these people and bringing it out into light. And, hopefully what I can say about these people that have been cyberbullying is that they get their shit together and be happy, because no one wants to be that angry, okay? No one wants to date an angry person. Alana says, yeah, that's the thing, right? To these Asian men harassing innocent Asian women online, stop it. Just stop it. It's silly, it's a waste of time, and if you're trying to get with a hot Asian lady, or just a lady in general, trust me, we can feel anger and loserishness from a mile away. Just stop. You need Asian women in your corner to be on your side, to advocate for you and sponsor you when you are not there. And don't tell me it's your First Amendment right to free speech and da-da-da-da-da. What you're doing is full of hate and it's full of violence. Full of it. That's why I asked if there may be like a double standard, because I don't advocate necessarily for... I'm not saying that there should be harassment on either side. Like, nobody should be trying to humiliate somebody else for the life that they choose. But it seems, based off of that quote, that it's like it's a one-way street, where if there is yellow fever, that should be discussed and articles should be written about it. But if it's the other way around, even if it is the same, like writing articles about it, that may not be accepted. Like, if you want to hot an Asian girl, for example, you can't talk about this stuff because it makes you look bitter,
Yeah, it's tough, because I think the way that Asian fetish, Asian women, all the stories have been shown and proposed and talked about, I don't think that has been necessarily healthy. I think that side has been a lot more unhealthy and tainted, in a sense, than the other. Because if you look back in history, I think if you were to get an Asian woman who is pursuing a white man, she's technically already starting from, if you want to talk about like a level of status or a level of class, probably, during those times, like post-war, she has like the lower hand, right? She does not have the upper hand in that sense. And I don't think women were going around during that time saying and talking and showing and approaching men and saying, oh, you're white, so let me date you. I don't think women were going up to white men I don't think Asian women are necessarily going up to white men on these dating apps and saying, hey, I only like white dicks, so can I date you? Like, there has been way more of the latter. There has been way more of the Asian fetish, and the way that it's been shown through media, the way it's been shown through criticizing, the way it's been shown through women screenshotting their phones and posting what these men say to them, has been way different than, I think, if a woman really wants to pursue a white man, and how that's been revealed. And so I think it's hard, because it's like, you can say this with a lot of other examples, but yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like, what if you really like Asian girls, and you may not necessarily, you have a type, there's a big difference between having a type and having an Asian fetish. And there's a lot of red flags in between to see if this person really does have an Asian fetish or a type. And so I think if you have a type and you think your type is Asian girls, but then you have to be careful because how do you tread that line, right? Like if you say something to this way or to that way, then all of a sudden someone can accuse you of having an Asian fetish. Or maybe you're into some kind of Asian girl and she sees that all your past girlfriends have been Asian. You know, what does that mean? And all these, you know, unanswered and assumptions, unanswered questions and assumptions start to pop up. Sorry, I got a little off track here. But I think it doesn't help when Asian men are criticizing Asian women for marrying Asian men or for marrying white men, you know, and I think it's all one and the same, right? We're all hopefully fighting the same fight here. And I think that, again, like Alana said, it's a waste of time and it's a waste of energy, and you are just showing hate. And a lot of these men get really violent, you know? You don't really see the opposite. You don't see women, like, constantly go and criticize all these Asian men necessarily, and writing all these, like, you know, I'm gonna cut your daughter's head off and feed it to the dogs type of situation. Like that's much rarer in this case. And so yeah, I don't necessarily think it's so much of a contradiction like you said, but I think if you are treading that line of, you know, you possibly have a type that is Asian women, that you have to be careful. You have to be sensitive to the past, because the past has a lot of history. And with history comes a lot of feelings and a lot of actions, and that's where it gets a little murky.
Okay. 2 more questions. What advice do you have for Asian women who are frustrated with men who prefer them because of their race?
So I would definitely say, you know, if you're, I don't know, it depends on the case. Is she dating this guy? Does she like this guy and she's kind of scared that maybe he has an Asian fetish? Is she just like already too many red flags? I would say get to know the person just like a real person, not because they're tall or short, not because they have X amount of money in their bank account, not because they're Asian or white or black or brown, but really just because they have 2 eyes and 2 arms, hopefully, and 2 legs and a heart and a kidney and all that, you know, all that stuff that is universal and says that we're all connected and we're all the same here. And then, you know, start to ask questions, start to find out if this person, what is their past, and how did they meet their most previous girlfriends? How long did they date for? Did they meet their family? Did they travel to their country? You know, like, there are red flags, and you can spot them if you are patient enough and careful enough. And just don't be afraid to ask the questions. Don't be afraid to straight up be like, do you have yellow fever? Like, I would definitely, or do you have an Asian fetish? Do you have a fetish for Asian women? I've asked that. So I think as transparent as possible is the best way to go about this, because you want answers and you can't afford to be in the dark when it comes to this stuff.
Okay. And my final question is, what advice do you have for men who are frustrated with Asian women who choose white men as their romantic partners over them?
So that's tough. I don't know. I'm not a man. I would say, look, if the girl is picking a white man over you, honey, she's not the girl you even want to be with in the first place. If she's going to look over you because she's picking some other guy because he's white, or who knows, you know, there's so many other things that go into this. But as I come to realize that person who picks something else over you because of something that you don't believe in, that person even isn't supposed to be in your life in the first place. And if they are, they'll come back in. If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. But I think that if they decide to go to, you know, if she's dating a bunch of guys and she ends up picking the white guy Who knows? Maybe because he's white. Who knows? Maybe because he's awesome and she just loves him for who she is. But yeah, I would say, don't let it get to you. There's so many people in this world, and the chances of you finding someone who's gonna like you for who you are, that's who you want to be with. Not someone who's gonna pick a white guy over you, or a guy who drives a Mercedes over you, or speaks 5 languages. Like that's just fundamental, I think. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure those frustrations are gonna come up, and you just got to tell yourself, like, why would you even want someone who's not going to see how unique and special you are? You want someone to be able to see that in you, and that's the right person for you.
Okay. No, that's fair enough. Those are all my questions. I wanted to thank you for answering them. I know some of them were tough.
Yeah, all good.
Yeah. But again, I want to thank you for coming on, and if you have anything else to add, go ahead.
Thank you for having me. I said thank you so much for reaching out and listening to our show. Alana and I, especially men, who listen to the show, that's a rarity. You guys are definitely not our demographic, but we definitely thank you guys, or thank you. And we're just hoping that we can keep, like I said, we're not experts. We're humans, and we're living in this world just like you are, in this crazy time. And we just want to be able to touch as many people. And again, like, hopefully what you experienced, Raphael, was, to start thinking and questioning and sort of talking about this in the sense where, it's nothing personal, we just, or it can come from a place that's very personal, but in the sense of having a discussion about it, the more we talk about it, the more people can become enlightened, the more people can start to become curious and have questions, and just, one love, stay woke. We always talk about that. And so, yeah, I hope people enjoy this, and I hope I answered the questions as thorough as I could.
You did.